Don Tidey when he was captured in Dublin, so far as I recall, there was a checkpoint somewhere around his house. I think he was going to school or that with some of the family, and there was fellas in Garda uniform. So I presume he took it was a Garda checkpoint. It happened early in the morning in November when Mr. Tidey was delivering his 13-year-old daughter to school. He lived in Stocking Lane in Rathfarnham, and so I imagine it happened about 9 o'clock in the morning.
The 1980s in Ireland, I think, was quite a dark period, particularly because of what were called the Northern Troubles, and also economically. There was a very deep recession in the 1980s. It was politically quite an unstable period, and we hadn't reached the sort of period in relation to the Troubles whereby there are political structures like the Good Friday Agreement which have stabilised and improved the whole situation.
The IRA funded its activities and Sinn Féin funded its activities. The two were inextricably linked all the time through a mixture of extortion, mainly extortion in Northern Ireland, bank robberies throughout the island of Ireland. There was a lot of bank robbery going on. There was a lot of post office raids. Even today, when people see the army escorting cash deliveries to banks, that goes back to that time.
By 1983, the IRA were desperately short of cash, so were Sinn Féin. They needed a lot of money, big money, to fund the campaign of violence in the north and the political campaign on which Sinn Féin had embarked. They needed big money, and some of their most violent activists come up with the idea that they might resort to kidnapping, and this plan was approved by the Army Council.
Don Tidey was a supermarket executive, an Englishman who lived and worked in Dublin, and he presumably was picked, I suppose, as a target because he might have access to a ransom, or that a ransom might be paid if he was taken.
This wasn't the first incident of a high-profile figure being targeted. Don Tidey was part of a litany of kidnappings that had been carried out in order to extort money to aid the IRA fundraising campaign.
This was kidnapping, extortion, intimidation to fund terrorist activity, and there was a phase when they did target wealthy people.
The various governments took the view that they would do everything in their power, that the Gardaí should do everything in their power to prevent any money being paid by way of ransom that would fund the IRA or any other paramilitary organisation. In the case of Don Tidey, the kidnappers demanded a ransom of 5 million, and that ransom demand was delivered to the offices of Associated British Foods over in London.
My recollection was that things moved pretty fast. The kidnapping happened. Mr. Tidey was abducted for ransom by the IRA, and immediately there was an enormous amount of Garda activity in that area, but there was an enormous amount of Garda activity all over the country. Pretty quickly over the succeeding hours and days, there were roadblocks commonly placed all over the place, leading to major population centres leading up north. There were roadblocks, cars were being checked, etc. And that went on for weeks.
I was in the army at the time. I was in Colony Barracks Longford and would have been on duty, I think. But it was common knowledge. It was all over the news. There were a lot of searches going on for him. And we were involved in that, the searches, and that the guards were looking at derelict houses, and we would have been supporting in respect of that. They were looking for safe houses for where kidnappers might be.
There was a search operation over a period of days and weeks covering a large tract of land, mountain and forest.
The search is going on throughout the whole country for Mr. Tidey, though there is a growing belief that unlike the Ben Dunn kidnapping, Mr. Tidey is being held somewhere south of the border.
The search was concentrated in Leitrim this morning and later moved across to the Armagh-Monaghan border. Army units and detectives searched derelict farm buildings and houses in that area, and checkpoints were in operation all day. The Garda believe Mr. Tidey is still in the Republic. They've identified some members of the gang and are now checking their movements during the last few days.
Certainly at the level that I was at, it was quite clear that the guards had good information. The guards tend to have very good intelligence. They're knit into communities. They know what's happening, and certainly in those days their intelligence was spot on, and that's how they found out that Don Tidey was in that general area. Now, they couldn't pin it down, but their information was good enough to tell them that he was in the greater Ballinamore area. But it did mean that there was a need for a quite large-scale search involving a lot of personnel to try and cover that ground. So it was divided into, small sectors, and piece by piece, each piece of the ground had to be searched. And I mean, certainly I think people were aware this was the search for Don Tidey.
I remember the day he was kidnapped very clearly. I had just taken an assembly service in the national school here and was leaving it at about 9:05. And you have to remember that in those days there was no email, there were no mobile phones, and I just went back to the house to collect my car to go off and visit some people in hospital when the phone rang and I was informed that he had been kidnapped. As soon as I was round that day, very quickly I went to the house, naturally, out of pastoral concern, and then I had virtually continual pastoral contact with them during the period of the kidnapping. I thought his 3 children were really so courageous and showed a tremendous kind of resolve. They were really admirable young people. I'm sure they must have been desperately worried, but at the same time they showed a tremendous fortitude and courage in their whole character, and it's something I'll always remember.
As a journalist, I think the most difficult crime to cover is a kidnapping, because you have to be so careful what you say. You might say something that might trigger the kidnappers to kill the hostages. There's a life at stake, and yet the Garda give you so little information to work on. The investigation into the kidnapping of Don Tidey dragged on for about 3 weeks. During that period, we were trying to get bits and pieces of information. There wasn't much to go on, and I requested an interview with Tidey's family.
But kidnappings are very difficult things to investigate, and very, very serious things, because a person's life is at stake. The media give it a lot of publicity, and Albert Thomas Cocker, the RTE, he interviewed the family.
Maybe the Gardaí decided that an appeal by the family might soften the hearts of the kidnappers. In any event, I was granted an interview.
I know he was a good journalist, that he wouldn't upset them, and he left them in there.
Myself and the crew were received very graciously by Don Tidey's children. They were very composed, very helpful, and I always remember that what they said was that the worst part of it was the awful silence, the awfulness of not knowing whether their father was alive or dead. The family's appeal was made at their home in South County Dublin. While it's believed that a ransom demand has been made to Quinsworths, the family revealed that no contact had been made with them.
No, none as yet.
No demand, no contact.
We don't know the whereabouts of my father, how he is, or what he's doing at all.
Alistair, how would you say he's bearing up to it?
I'd say there couldn't be a better man at this present moment, to cope with such an ordeal. And he's both physically and mentally fit for it. But our major concern at the moment, as you can imagine, is to get him back.
Well, your father has been in this country for what, 15 years?
15, 20 years.
He regards it as his home now, and he's got a lot of friends here, and I think he's quite happy to stay here for the rest of his life, and I don't think there'll be any hard feelings about this ordeal. And it's a threat that every businessman in this country has to be aware of, and you can only hope that it isn't going to be you, but I don't think this will at all affect his love for this country.
The key thing I have found over the years is that you travel with people. When you're around a fair old while, people remember nothing you said, but they remember you sat it out with them.
You never think it's going to be your father, and even though we were very aware of the possibility, we always discounted it, you know.
The greatest worry now is the silence. It was an initial shock, of course, but now the silence, not knowing where he is, it is a worry. Every time the phone goes, your hopes are raised, and when it's not these people on the phone, your hopes are dashed. And it goes on day and night, 24 hours a day. And that is really what is now wearing us down.
I remember when they gave the interview with Tom McCaughrean, in that I was there. The children, I know, are very much anxious about this whole affair, and it's not that long ago since this family had a most unfortunate happening. The mother, who was a lovely person, died, and indeed the family is only just really recovering its feet from that.
We want to know that our father is well and fit now. And if my father could contact us, or the kidnappers could contact us, and give us some proof that he is well.
Well, then perhaps some early release could be arranged.
Following that, yes.
But you would obviously wish for his release now, without any ransom or anything being paid, in purely humanitarian grounds.
Of course, yes.
Would you like, Susan, just to, assuming that your father is in position to hear or see this interview, to give him any message?
Yes, just that we're fine and he doesn't have to worry about us, but we're worrying about him.
And the kidnappers to let him go?
Let him go and make some contact to us, that he's okay.
I think there was a groundswell of very strong public feeling, partly for a variety of reasons. There was a human story to this. Young people who had lost their mother, now their father had been kidnapped, and I think there was a tremendous human empathy for the family, and I found that was very widespread. It transcended differences and went right across the board. And so many people I met who just hoped it would all end peacefully.
Let us pray for Don Tidey, cut off from his loved ones, and now in the darkness of captivity. We pray that his captors listen to the prayers of all Irish people and restore him safely to his sons and daughter in this Christian season of goodwill, harmony, forgiveness, hope, and peace. Lord, hear us.
After an extensive nationwide search, Garda intelligence received information that Don Tidey was being held in a wood near the town of Ballinamore, County Leitrim.
Some days before the rescue, there was huge activity around Ballinamore, and I was up there for a number of days before the rescue, and again really intense Garda and army activity. High visibility, roadblocks everywhere. Balnamore's a tiny village. It was absolutely swamped by armed Gardaí, armed soldiers.
He was kidnapped in the end of November, and then coming up to about a week or a bit more than a week before Christmas, there was a lot of army activity and Garda activity around here, an awful lot of it, to the point where all houses were searched. Practically every house, let's say every house around the area was searched to some extent.
The decision was made that a higher number of guards were needed to conduct such a large-scale operation, so recruits from Templemore were drafted in to help aid the search.
Although it's not been officially acknowledged, I understand this massive Army Garda operation is linked to the search for kidnapped executive Mr. Don Tidey. Tonight, the area within a 10-mile radius of Balnamore, County Leitrim is virtually sealed off with roadblocks. Everybody going in and out is being stopped and questioned. From early morning, searches of homes, deserted buildings and woods have been carried out. Local Gardaí are being helped by over 100 colleagues drafted in from County Cavan, from Sligo, Dublin and Templemore. The Army presence is provided by units from Bundoran, Galway, Longford, Athlone and Cavan. The Air Corps are also assisting. The operation is being coordinated by Chief Superintendent James McNally.
What one remembers was the intensity of the police operation, the number of troops, everybody heavily armed. There was a crescendo rolling along. It was quite obvious that things were moving in a direction that certainly the guards and the army thought there's going to be a confrontation. There is something here. They were combing woods, foot by foot.
On the news that night, some top-ranking Garda said there was a ring of steel around Balnamore. Now, we did feel there was a lot. Certainly, even in the week before, there was an awful lot of guards and army, and there was they were at crossroads with open fires because it was very cold weather later on. So if you were driving around the roads, it was there certainly seemed to be a lot.
When you're dealing with highly motivated, desperate people, they will do things, they will take risks, they will take chances. They almost certainly knew the countryside better than the police and the troops, and almost certainly had thought about, what are we going to do if our hideout is discovered? Which way are we going to go?
On the 16th of December 1983, a search party set out to investigate Dorada Wood, located near Ballinamore, where it was believed that Don Tidey was being held. Amongst the search party that set out that day were Private Patrick Kelly and Garda recruit Gary Sheehan, who had been drafted in from Templemore. The search party were about to stumble upon the bunker where Don Tidey had been held captive over the past 23 days under the watchful eye of the IRA. This would result in a fierce gunfight that would ultimately end with the deaths of Garda recruit Gary Sheehan and Private Patrick Kelly. In anticipation of a confrontation, the IRA put a balaclava on Don Tidey to disguise him as one of their own.
Gary Sheehan, a young man who paid the supreme price for doing his duty. Our hearts go out to his parents, brothers, sisters, who are still benumbed by the suddenness of this tragedy. We feel deeply for them and their painful loss. We share with them the depressing sense of shock. We share with them the bitter question, what is happening to our country that human life has become so expendable?
In the midst of the confusion, a grenade was detonated. 2 IRA members made their getaway in a car parked in the vicinity. The rest made their escape through the forest, taking a number of soldiers and Garda hostage, and would in turn open fire on Garda. In the chaos that ensued, the IRA gang fled, leaving numerous Garda injured and 2 lives lost.
the 16th of December in '83, I was in Ballinamore as part of the Army Reserve to the search team, and then subsequently in Dorada Wood. While we were still in Ballinamore, we heard shots, quite a lot of shots, and then we got a radio message that the shooting was happening in Dorada Wood. The only information we could get was that terrorists, as they were described, had fled, but it wasn't clear what was still up in Dorada Wood.
Armed Garda and troops had surrounded that area, but there were periods running battle and they fought their way out of it. But fortunately, Don Tidey was rescued, but the IRA had put a balaclava on him, and he looked very like one of the IRA people. He was lucky he wasn't shot by mistake, but thankfully when they did get him into a place where it was safe to talk to him, they discovered who he was.
We arrived up at where the dugout was, and Private Kelly and Recruit Garda Sheehan one was lying in the ditch and the other, as far as I remember, lying down, but they were both dead at that stage. The IRA had fled across the nearby fields in a quite systematic and organised way. Initially they escaped in the back of, or in a car which happened to have the keys in the ignition.
I was in the army barracks in Longford. I remember distinctly I was walking across the barrack square when we got news that there was a shooting incident in our area of operation in Ballinamore. I took command of a patrol that went from Longford to Ballinamore, and we set up an inner cordon. We set up checkpoints essentially, and we were looking for, we had guards with us, and we were looking for the IRA escapees. We were trying to prevent them from escaping from the area.
With the training that you have, you just have to get on with it, and there's always the adrenaline is flowing, and there's always the possibility that isn't the end of it. So you're very much thinking of the safety and security and the lives of the soldiers that are with you. So you're very focused on your job. Any of the kind of the shock and reflection on it comes later.
The day after Don Tidey's rescue, he made a statement to the press.
Thank you for waiting. I'm sorry that you have had to wait as long as you have, but you'll appreciate